In 2023, her story of alleged clergy sexual abuse by International House of Prayer founder Mike Bickle rocked the Christian community, and it led the House of Prayer to permanently separate from Bickle. Then she was known simply as the primary Jane Doe, but on this podcast, she reveals her identity and gives new details of her story. Welcome to The Roys Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Roys, and this Saturday, February 8th, the woman known as Jane Doe will be appearing at the Restore Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. Joining her will be Tammy Woods, another survivor of sexual abuse by Mike Bickle, and Elizabeth Herder, a former House of Prayer staff member and a key advocate for Bickle's victims. Several months ago, I spoke with Jane Doe, and it was then that she told me that she wanted to reveal her identity and speak at the Restore Conference. But then she had some serious health concerns, and we were unsure if she'd be able to make the conference. But I'm so happy to report that she's had a remarkable turnaround, and she will be able to make the Restore Conference. But a couple nights ago, we were talking about her appearance at the conference, and it was then that she said that she wanted to record this podcast. One, because there's so much of her story to tell, and we have limited time on Saturday. But two, because she wanted people to know why she's revealing her identity before the conference. And so I am so honored and thrilled to introduce you to this amazing and brave woman. Well, again, joining me today is the woman known previously only as Mike Bickle's primary Jane Doe. But in the late 1990s, when the abuse began, she was just a 19-year-old intern at the International House of Prayer, and she was known as Deborah Perkins. So, Deborah, welcome. It is such an honor to have you join me.
Thank you, Julie. It's an honor to be here.
And it was an honor, too, in November 2023 to be able to report your story exclusively. You came forward to one of our reporters, Rebecca Hopkins. She did, I thought, just an outstanding job.
Yes, she did.
With your story, yeah. But now you're coming forward with your real name. And at the time that we did the story, you wanted a pseudonym. So why now do you want to come forward and tell the world who you are?
Well, when I really woke up to the abuse, it was me listening to a Bill Cosby survivor. And the power of her testimony was actually what woke me up. And so if it could help anyone to put my name and my face to my story, I want to do that.
It is so important. And I mean, even as Jane Doe, I know this story made a huge, huge impact. In fact, when it came out, it was almost like just these, like shock going through the Christian world, because previously it was, there was a statement made by the advocate group saying there were several women out there, but to have a specific woman come forward and tell your story, really an unbelievably courageous thing you did. And you were on the front lines, like you're the first one. That took an awful lot of courage, Deborah. And just, I just want to say I'm so proud of you and what you did. And it really, really was huge. So thank you for doing that and for being willing to really be on the front lines.
Yeah, it's an honor. It's an honor.
It really has started, the avalanche of other women coming forward. And we know that there's a investigation that's going to be coming out. In fact, it may come out before this podcast comes out. I know it's very imminent, and we're looking forward to, in some ways looking forward, in some ways dreading what that's going to say. But I think it will be revealing. I said in the open that you had details that I'm just realizing. Because when we write a story like this, you can only put so much in a print article. But one of the things that I just recently found out was that Mike didn't just groom you. He groomed your entire family. In fact, you knew Mike Bickle, you met him when you were 12. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Talk about how he groomed your family.
So my dad went to a conference in California. It was a vineyard conference, and Mike Bickle was a speaker. My dad is a Nazarene pastor. We grew up conservative, evangelical. And we just were curious to what God was doing in the charismatic world. We were unfamiliar with that world. And so his first experience was hearing Mike and John Wimber and Paul Cain at a Vineyard conference in 1989. And I was 12 at the time. My dad came home. He actually saw signs and wonders at this conference. It was powerful. And Mike was this winsome, this big personality, but like approachable. And so my dad had gone up to Mike at the conference and just started asking Mike questions, which turned into them going to a couple lunches together, which was unusual favor, right? And so my dad came home from this conference jazzed. He had met this man, Mike Bickle, and God was moving in ways that we didn't know. And so we loved so much about Mike. He loved the word and he loved the spirit. And so it was this combination. And then, he was just winsome and easy to talk to, approachable. And, yet he was a world leader and he showed my dad such favor and kindness. And, so it really changed the trajectory of my whole family. Soon after that, we moved to Oklahoma, and my dad again took a pastor role there at a Nazarene church. And we would then drive to Kansas City anytime we could to listen to Mike his teaching. And so I remember the first time I heard Mike, it was on the life of David, and I'm 12 years old. And he was talking about David being chased by Saul and going from cave to cave. And I remember just really touched by the way that Mike seemed to know Jesus. And I, as a 12-year-old, I went up to him after the message and I told him how powerful the message was and how it touched my heart. And of course, that's when it starts, and, he just lights up and he starts to just like lavish on me of just, oh my, you're dad's daughter. And, and he would just like, I've wanted to meet you ever since I met with your dad. And, and so then it would lead to us having dinner together with his family or us just in his office. So, and we just couldn't believe it. Like he was our new hero in the faith. And we had favor. And so anytime we would come to town, we got time with this man. And so that went on for many years before I actually moved to Kansas City.
Yeah. So that was, you're 12. I mean, part of me would say, did he really have interest in you when you were 12? But then we know now, Tammy Woods, her abuse started when she was 14. So that's not outside the realm of possibility. But it was 7 years later, when you were 19, that you moved to Kansas City. And at this point, he's at Metro Christian Fellowship, right? He hasn't started the International House of Prayer. But you come on as an intern at Metro Christian Fellowship. And then the grooming became much more intentional, it sounds like. Talk about some of that grooming that Mike did with you and how it impacted you at the time.
I remember the first Sunday had moved to town. He came up to me at church and he said that he had dreamed about me. Well, I'm Nazarene background, so the prophetic dreams, that's a whole new world to me. And I was like, Mike Bickle had dreams about me. Wow. But he would just talk about the sovereignty of God, that I was now here and he knew I would one day move here. And so it was just this grandiose, awesome, like the big story of God, but then my part to play in it. And he was going to help me, in my destiny. And so he would start prophesying to me. And he was literally at every meeting I was at. Like, it was just crazy how quick he moved in to my little world, where in this internship, the leaders of the internship were just blown away at their newfound favor with Mike. They were nobodies before.
Yeah, before that, they weren't getting that kind of attention, right?
No, and I have a brother that had already was already in Kansas City, and the same for him. He just suddenly had so much favor with Mike. And so, Mike would come and do Bible studies for our internships, but now we're doing prayer meetings and Mike's leading the prayer meetings. And so he was just everywhere. I mean, I remember I was reading a Charles Finney book, and it was outside of the building, and he comes up to me and he's like, wow, that's my favorite. I can't believe you're reading this book. I mean, strike up a conversation. And of course, he's already our family's hero. So I'm really comfortable. I trust him more than anyone, really. I mean, my dad's like saying this is the man, and talking so highly about him. And so, that's where it started. He would bring me gifts. I mean, it could be as random as a jar of quarters. But he just, and he's a awkward kind of guy too, but like everyone just goes, oh, that's just Mike. And so he could, everyone gave him a pass card. He could get away with anything. It was just, oh my gosh, Mike, we just all like looked up to him so much.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody said to me, kind of looks like an IBM salesman or something like that. He in so many ways, not who you would expect to be this charismatic leader, but I think everybody felt like he had like this direct line to God. And as a result, that's when he became sort of a larger than life figure. It's something else I remember you mentioning that I think you told Rebecca for the story was that there are a number of other young women who were a part of this internship, and he would come over and have like movie and pizza nights just with the women, without his wife, without his children. And at the time, like, and I get it. Like, I remember being that age and being super naive myself. So like, I can understand, but now looking back, like, how weird is that he would do that?
It's so weird. None of us saw it. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. He always surrounded himself with young women. And yeah.
That is so weird. And then there were some prophetic words for you, comparing you to Esther, right? I mean, what exactly did he say in that prophecy that was so impactful for you?
So he had given me a word on October 30th. It was a Wednesday night prayer meeting. And so we had a couple of internships that were a part of the church at this prayer meeting. And he had everyone pray for me. And he said, and he gave me Song of Solomon 6:9, that I was God's favorite, which, you think about, that's special, but, we're all God's favorite. And, but that's kind of how it started. And it really moved me. I've had a really personal, beautiful friendship with God since I was 4 years old. And so when I came to Kansas City, I was a young woman that loved the word and really loved Jesus and really was devoted and dedicated. And so that night was really special to me of, wow, I want to just give everything. If I haven't already, Jesus, I just surrender everything to you. And, and so that was so special that I just said to Jesus, can you confirm that this was you, by giving Mike Isaiah 49? And that was just a precious passage to me. Again, I'm not a prophetic person at this time. But I was really wanting Jesus to say, yes, Deborah, this is me. I'm with you. And so that Sunday morning, it was November 3rd, 1996. I come to church, and Mike comes right up to me and he says, Deborah, I had this dream about you last night. And he says it was about you and John Wimber. And, and he goes, let me pray for you after my message today. Come up to the ministry time and I will pray for you and I will tell you the dream. And so, after the message, I come up and fascinating, Diane was there with him, and he starts to give me the biggest prophecy of my entire life. But he starts with the dream. And he says, in the dream, I saw Isaiah 49 written over your life. And he said, and the Lord said, give her the language of her heart. And he said, And then he starts to prophesy. And he said, Deborah, you are like Esther, but it's not just like Esther. You're going to raise up thousands of Esthers. And all of it was like this. It was a big word, but it had a sobriety to it and a fear of the Lord, for me at least, of if this is true, then I really want to give, everything. I want to just every part of me in every way that I know how to give myself in that kind of surrender and devotion to God. And so then that was the day that he actually left for a trip, which he always had this big thing of that he didn't travel much, that God wanted him to stay in Kansas City. So it was a big deal if he traveled. And that was when he left to go to Asia. And that day and it's a Sunday, so I don't know why, but I was at where we had our internship, and I was the one that answered the phone. And so he got that number somehow and he called me. And that was the first time that I remember him calling me. And he was kind of like in a giddy, laughing mood. And he was like, "Hi, Deborah." And I'm like, "Is this Mike?" And he goes, "Yes." And then he started talking about the word and he started giving me names. Like he said, "I'm just going to call you Esther," or "I'm just going to call you Shulamite." And that's he has a lot of coding that he does. And he's like, "I'm about to leave on a trip and I just was going to call. And that was a really cool word today. And wow, that's just so awesome about the dream." And that's when he started to come in thick with, I soon after moving to Kansas City I felt like I was at the center of his world. And it was powerful. And I just had no grid for it to be anything but this man of God that was going to help, disciple me and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was interesting just having a discussion with you and several of the women, Tammy Woods and also Elizabeth Herder, who are going to be at the Restore Conference with you in just several days, which I'm so excited about. But you and Tammy both noted that Mike, uncharacteristic for a predator. Often a predator looks for women who are broken or have some sort of broken background, very needy. On the other, he wasn't like that with you. Like he actually looked for women and families that were really stable. Like you had a great relationship with your father. You weren't looking for a father figure. You weren't needing, this man in your life. And kind of one of, if you don't have a father in your life, then often you have this hole that you're trying to fill with it. But if you do have a great father in your life, and this is a strength, but in a way it became a weakness in that you just trusted men, especially someone who's a good friend of your father. Like it would never enter your mind at that point, would it? That this man isn't trustworthy or could do something bad.
Right. Exactly. I came from a beautiful Christian home. My family was just amazing. Both of my parents, extraordinary in the way that they pastored me or discipled me, led me, loved me. Just a firm foundation, solid in Christ. And so, yeah, you're right. And Tammy and I both have the same story with that. We both came from really great families. And Mike was same with Tammy's parents. He was close with my parents. Soon after the grooming started, he went to Oklahoma City and him and Diane stayed at my house. He called me from the landline in my own house while I was in Kansas City. He's bold too.
Wow. It's just kind of hitting me, the level of betrayal. Of your father, of your mother, of your entire family. And obviously of you, but it's so wicked, absolutely wicked. I know that during sometime around this time, you got the prophecy that now we know a lot of women have gotten this prophecy about Diane. When did that happen? And again, for those who might not have heard this before, what was that prophecy that he gave to you?
The prophecy was that Diane was going to die, his wife, and that we would be married. The first time that he said that to me, he called me from that trip to Asia. And so he's in another time zone. It was daytime for me, but it was night for him. And he called, I was living with a host family, and he called the host family, and the dad answered the phone. And so he comes, and, again, landline days, and he says, someone's on the phone for you. And so I get on the phone, and Mike's laughing, and he tells me how he had disguised his voice. And so, of course, it's just all the things he does is utterly shocking, and it's supposed to be, right? So I'm in a shock. Like, he's calling me from Asia. And then he wasn't himself. Like, I soon was like, what? He's laughing. He's talking really loud. But in that space, he started to tell me, I need to tell you something, and it's really serious. But the Lord has spoken to me several times that Diane is going to die. And he goes, and I believe that we're going to get married. And again, now it's more shock, not just that he called me, but now it's like, and I'm losing agency very fast in this time. He's just come after me, and he's so sophisticated in the way that he manipulates and lies. And I mean, he is a dark deceiver, but it's masked behind my spiritual hero and my dad's friend, And so I soon thought something was off. And then he started to tell me about the alcohol that was in the fridge and that he had been drinking. And again, that was so odd because, I was raised Nazarene. We didn't drink, and I'm just going, okay, well, at least you're free. But wow. I mean, but it's just, it was really messing with me, the whole thing, just shocking. And, but that's when he started telling me that. And, he would tell me in every different way for years after that. He would talk about the house he was going to build me and how it was going to be modest on the front, but it could be as big as I wanted on the back. And it was going to be on his, and that, again, that was an aha moment for me. Maybe, let's say 8 years ago was like, oh, the whole thing, the fasted lifestyle, live simple. Well, we're finding that he's funding all of this double life that he's living, and that's lots of money's going to this double life of sin, So yeah, that was the first time that he told me the prophecy.
And again, you're 19, he's 42, married, he has children. I mean, just the inappropriateness of this is just off the charts, completely off the charts. But again, you're 19 and you're naive and you've never experienced this. One of the things that's striking me, though, as you're telling me this story, I mean, obviously that was a false prophecy. Diane's still very much alive decades later. But the previous one, you had actually asked for, some sort of sign that this was real, seemingly got that sign. How do you deal with that? Like, do you think God spoke through Mike, or do you think he was a fraud the whole time? Or, what do you do with that word? Obviously, you still know the date that you got it, and does it still have meaning to you? Or do you feel like it was from God? Or do you feel like it was just Mike's manipulation? Or what do you make of that?
Well, the beautiful thing was that I was truly connected to God in all of it. And so if God had spoke to me through that, Isaiah 49, that stayed true, whether Mike got it or not. But it's God is mysterious. And I just have to say, I'm going to have conversations with God one day asking these questions, because that one was harder for me because I didn't tell Mike that. So how did he get it? I think Mike has always been a fraud. When Tammy's story broke, it just went to the next level of the underbelly and the darkness, the evil, the wickedness of this man. The thought of him being 25 and her being 14. So I don't know how he got Isaiah 49. And the good thing is I stayed tender before Jesus through the whole thing. So I'm not like, God, why would you allow that? I trust that he kept me. You kept me. That's the testimony. And so it took me a while to wake up to the fullness of who Mike is. I think we still don't know, but the testimony is, Jesus, you kept me. And in the right timing, in your kindness and in your gentleness, in your mercy, you woke me up to the evil of this man.
Wow. So in 1997, he convinces you to leave this internship at Metro Christian Fellowship and become basically his own research assistant, put you up in an apartment. And now now you're having a lot of contact with him before, but I'm guessing as his personal assistant, you're having, just seeing him probably every day for several hours a day.
Yes. I saw him every day. And it was several hours. If I was averaging, I would say, maybe 5 hours a day. It wasn't just at the apartment. We would meet up different places in the city, libraries, cemeteries.
Cemeteries?
Yeah, kind of creepy, but really creepy. But he knew that no one would go there. And so it was a place we could go, 'cause people knew Mike in the city. So there was, he kind of had his stomping grounds of where he thought it would be safe to go. Now I know that, there were several women all along. So I'm wondering if he had different places he took me to, or, but yeah, so it was, really unfortunate that he was in between being the lead pastor of Metro Christian Fellowship and starting the International House of Prayer. Because in 97, 98, and 99, he had told all of his staff and accountability people that he was in some kind of transition, which afforded him all of this time with no accountability with me. I remember when IHOP started, how I was so relieved, because not only did he now have a full-time job, but it was 24/7. So it started to dwindle how much time we would ever have alone together.
And he gave you a key to his office. Was that at this stage, or was that later when he had started the International House of Prayer?
I had a key in the very beginning, 1996.
And did any other interns have a key to his office, or was that just you?
I think it was just me. I had a friend that he said I could bring her with my key. So, that was a thing. It's a thing that we've watched with all of the different women that have come forward, is keys to his office, keys to his hotel room. He gives keys.
So then, he goes to Europe and takes you and several other people, a team of about 5 of you, right?
There was 5 women, and then there was 1 male.
He always had women, didn't he? Always women around him. And then that is when things really began to turn to an overt sexual nature. Would you describe what happened on that trip?
So we were in several places in England and France. our final day was going to be in Paris, and it was going to be our free day. So we were doing book tables. We were staying with host families. But in Paris, he was going to get a hotel. Now, we were in Paris for 2 nights. And the first night I was with my girlfriends that were my age in a hotel. The next night was different. And so let me just describe that day. We were taking a tour of Paris, and we had a tour guide. And suddenly we're crossing the street at the Louvre, and suddenly there's no Mike. And all of us are just looking everywhere. I mean, it was literally like a suddenly. And we're like, where did he go? And the rest of the day we spent looking for him. And you can only imagine that we got crabby. It became this weird, who knows Mike the best. And it was an awful day. And so we finally, and I still don't remember how we knew where we were to go to the hotel. This is before cell phones, but we went to this really shady hotel in a shady part of town. And Mike has this sinister, smile on his face when we walk in. And he's like, he actually says, scolds us for if you really knew me, you would know that I would have stayed in the same place all day. And he said, I stayed at the Louvre all day and waited for you guys. And we're like, we were there. We were just all so confused. But then he's going to save the day. And he tells us that he's used his honorarium money to buy us each a hotel room, which, I'm thinking, I don't want my own hotel room. But that's what happened. And so I went to my hotel room. And again, Paris, Europe, it's really small. And as soon as I walk in, the landline, the phone rings, and it's Mike. And he says, hey, let's meet at the restaurant across the street. And again, if I was thinking clearly, I would have not said yes, but I wasn't at this time. And so I met him at the restaurant. And I remember he got us a couple rounds of cocktails. And
had you ever drunk before? Like you said, you're raised Nazarene, probably teetotaler, right?
I had only had a glass of wine in Europe on my, I did a discipleship training school with Youth with a Mission. And they told us if our host family serves wine, you drink it. So I had a glass of wine before this.
So basically, he knows that you don't know how to handle alcohol. You're very young.
Yep. And so, I can still remember the restaurant, where he's sitting, where I'm sitting. The next thing I remember is we are walking just to the alleyway right next to that restaurant. And that is where he began to kiss me. And I don't mean just like kiss, like it was just full on. And, and then that's where I don't remember. The next thing that I remember was waking up the next day in my hotel room. And I remember not being okay. Like, I'm out of sorts. I'm my brain is fuzzy. It's not like I'm sick. I'm not, but I'm just not okay. I have my clothes on. But that's the day that we're going to go to the airport to come back to Kansas City. And so I'm just, the whole time I was even carrying my luggage on cobblestone streets and to get to the train station, I'm just trying to, act normal. And I remember by the time we got on the airplane, I was fine. And I just remember being okay. I'm so glad I made it. And so, that was the first time I remember him sexual abuse.
At that point, now looking back, I think when anybody hears a story like that, you're thinking, sounds like a date rape drug was given you, something like that. At the time, did that enter your mind? And even how did you process the kiss, which you remember? How do you process that? I would think that would mess you up pretty bad.
It did. My first journal entry, I always would have time with the Lord every morning journal. The first one that I just, in this last year and a half or so, I looked at it and I said that I felt like I was drowning and I was trying to come up for air. But the abuse just really progressed from that point. And Mike at first most times he would say he was so sorry and we would need to repent. And then he would lead me through Psalm 51 prayer that David wrote after committing adultery with Bathsheba. And we would pray before the Lord and ask for forgiveness. And it was just like we overstepped. I need to take responsibility in that too. And that we were sorry and we were repenting. And so that would go on. And you need to know, like a lot of times we would be together and it was just all really spiritual. It was, I'm reading all of these Desert Father books and I'm writing things for him. I'm doing research for him. We're talking about the fasted lifestyle. I'm transcribing his notes and merging them together. We are talking about dreams. We're talking about, he has this whole prophetic history. So it wasn't like we crossed a line all the time. You would have, it just happened here or there at first.
He would lead you through a prayer, obviously putting responsibility on you. I mean, we know now, which honestly, this wasn't even talked about, sadly, back then, but adult clergy sexual abuse. We understand now that when somebody's a spiritual leader over you in some spiritual authority, you don't really have agency. That person, you can't really give consent because there's this huge power differential and they're manipulating you. Yet it seems like in doing that, like, let's confess together, that he was putting this on you to make you feel guilty, to make you feel like this is your thing too. Were you beginning to deal with guilt on your own for this, even though it was, yeah.
That's what kept both Tammy and I, that's what kept us silent, was that shame, again, because he preyed on our utter devotion to Jesus and just really pure hearts after the Lord. And so the shame, kept it locked. But I mean, honestly, it wasn't until I heard the Bill Cosby survivor share her story where she was drug raped, that I fully woke up. And that was in March of 2023. And so when I heard that story, I was in my kitchen and she was talking about how she didn't like alcohol and that Bill knew that and that he still gave her the alcohol. And then she's saying that he slipped drugs into it as well, as she knew that later. And somehow that had the power to just break my shelf. I had been putting all of these evil things about Mike on a shelf for a long time, but then it just broke. And the phrase that went through my mind was, "It wasn't your fault." And for the first time, I saw me at age 20 and him at age 43, and I had lost all agency. And then I saw how powerful he was, and it just all connected in a moment. And I just hit my kitchen floor and wailed. And I had been on a journey of seeing things for a while. And, Something's Not Right, the book by Wade Mullen, Something's Not Right had been going on in me, in my innermost being, like, it just was like, oh, something's not right. And so for years, I would say for at least 17 years, I had been gently but confronting Mike on every different thing, whether it was leadership or theology or another woman, or I had a dream, or I saw you do this to a woman in front of me, and that's really wrong. So I had confronted him, again, thinking I was a daughter that actually had a voice, thinking that he would listen. And then it took me a while to realize, no, he's not listening. And then it took me a while to go, you're the evil man behind the curtain. Even the whole thing, you send your flying monkeys to do your bidding. And I told him that too, years and years ago, gently, again, with tears. But I said, Mike, I can't follow Jesus and stay at IHOP. I said, that should alarm you. I go, I can't do what God's asked me to do as a believer and stay here. And anyway, but I woke up. That was my big wake up moment, was hearing the Bill Cosby Survivor. And that's where I remembered Paris. And then of course the memories start all coming back. And at first it's just kind of, they're just here and there, and you piece it all together, but then it just starts to get more fluid, and you begin to see the narrative, the false narratives, and just how powerful it was. I mean, just even the Desert Fathers, like he would talk about, they went to a desert. Well, that was how he got me isolated. I was spending hours a day alone with God. Now, the truth is, I was. So that was the beauty of it, the put me in a cell and it'll teach me everything I need to know. It was true. I was connecting with God in that place. And so that's how I survived, but really actually had a life in God in that time. But he used it all. I mean, the fasted lifestyle, everything was to get these young women isolated, alone, all in this beautiful spirituality. Yeah.
So it actually ended somewhere around 2000. Your dad bought you a house eventually. So you moved out of the apartment. Several women moved in with you, and then it sounds like there were some other women that came to IHOP that seemed to get his attention. Did you get at the time, though? I mean, you're seeing these things, but you didn't really, you kind of thought you were the only one for a long time, correct?
I thought I was the only one. And I think that's the biggest shock to me now, is because I saw so much. I confronted him on so much. Why didn't I just fully go there? I just never, they say it takes, especially the level of trauma that I experienced and the sophistication of it, it takes many years before you can unearth that trauma and remember, even just scientifically where it goes in our brain.
So you kind of suppressed the memories for a long time.
Yes. It was not there. So after some of my friends were coming around that first apartment, he didn't like it because he was there a couple times. And so he then got another apartment that was 5 miles further down the freeway. And so I didn't live at that apartment, but I would meet him at that apartment. And now it almost feels like a horror film. It was in this really gross part of town, and it was dirty, and there's no furniture. It's just like, it's dark. But anyway, that was in 97. I think, and then my dad got us the house in 98. So.
And this whole time, even there were some times when you met him at a hotel, it seems like the line he didn't cross with you and with Tammy Woods is there was never intercourse. It would never, everything but not that. In some way of thinking, did he think that somehow made him more chaste?
So I didn't know this until 2023. After I had woke up, I was talking to a friend, and this friend, it's a trusted friend. We were at Starbucks, and she's looking around to make sure. And I'm like, what is she about to say? And she said, did Mike Bickle ever do anything physical to you? And this was like, I've just told Murray at this point, right? And I'm like, oh, but I start to cry and I start to shake, but I tell her my story and tears are streaming down her face. And she says to me, I have permission to tell you and to tip my hat off to you that there's a current woman. And if my shelf hadn't broke already, I just wept for weeks and weeks at the horror of this. And so soon after that, I found out this woman told my friend that Mike had said to her that Bob Jones told Mike that he could do anything he wanted with a woman except intercourse and keep his mantle.
Wow. And it makes you wonder the level of his own self-deception. I mean, deception is always a part of a predator's behavior. Obviously he was deceiving you constantly, and deceived many others, but there's this self-deception. I mean, that he could think that he could behave this way with multiple women, betray them, betray their families, betray God, destroy lives, entire lives. Like, you went on to have a life. We know people who have not gone on to have a life, whose entire lives have been destroyed by Mike Bickle. And he can think that because there wasn't intercourse, that he has a mantle. It's just, that is absolutely shocking. And yet not in the sense that this is what we know now. I mean, the more stories I do, the more the profile of a predator becomes more clear, and the self-deception is just off the charts. So you kept quiet from 2000 to 2023. So 23 years. You're thinking, and I think you said to me, you believed you were his darkest secret. That's the term that both of you would use when you referred to this?
Tammy says his greatest mistake, and I thought I was his darkest secret. Yeah.
Yeah, the two of you have so many parallels, and I know we're going to get to when the two of you finally began communicating, because I know that was huge for you. But let's fast forward now to 2023. You told us about the Bill Cosby thing, and that was in our article. What was not in our article was you had a series of dreams. I don't know if that was before and after, but it was right around the same time. Tell me about these dreams that you're having in 2023.
On February 5th of 2023, I had an incredibly powerful dream where Jesus was descending and I was descending with him. And so it was just like his life, like just the beauty of coming as a baby, born in a manger, his little life, like just the suffering servant, the 30 years before he even, had a ministry. And so I'm just like watching him in this descend from being fully God and just as a man. And so it's hard to describe in the dream, but so he's descending and then he continues to descend, into hell. Like he died. I watch him die and just weep with him. And then he actually descends into hell. And then he begins to ascend. And all I can do is, oh, the power, Oh, the power. And he puts the ocean on his back as a garment. Okay. While all this is happening in only ways dreams can, the back of my house is a courtroom. And Mike is in the back of the courtroom. And he's sweating. And someone else is on the stand. And he goes, phew, I don't have to take the stand. And I said to him, you're next. And I wake up. Now, there's a lot of beauty that I can say, but I just want to talk just briefly that the mystery part of the dream is that Lucifer wanted to ascend, I will ascend without descending. And so it was just this just stark contrast to the beauty of Jesus. And as believers and followers, that we live a life where we descend before, and we say yes to taking up our cross and following before we ascend with him in the power of his resurrection. But in that moment, he was saying, I'm exposing Mike. I'm going to expose Mike. And so that was February 5th. Well, I wake up and it was a Sunday. And I said to my husband, babe, and I tell him the dream, but I said, I've had this dream before. And I had the same dream. Well, when I get to church, and I do this all the time because I'm a dreamer, I looked up February 5th. And February 5th, to the day, 6 years before, I had the same dream about God exposing Mike. And so I had such fear of the Lord, I wanted to get on the floor. I'm like, you're going to expose Mike. And again, I haven't woke up yet. This is February. I haven't fully woke up. And then March 5th, I have a dream. And in the dream, it begins with Darlene Cunningham, who's the founder with her husband, Lauren, of YWAM, Abuse with a Mission. And she's in this news reporting room. And she, with joy and with tears, is giving this tribute to her husband of a life well lit. And the nations, all the nations are just celebrating this life and has Lauren has touched so many and he dies this humble man. And so it was just this beautiful scene. And then the rest of the dream begins to be chaotic. And there's just everyone in every different stream in the body of Christ at this convention center. And it's huge, just thousands upon thousands of people. And I'm seeing people again from Nazarene, denomination, all different streams. And I get lost in my hotel, and I'm now in the maid's quarters. And so it goes from this really beautiful hotel to kind of dark and dingy. And so I'm in the maid's quarters and I hear Mike, and he's in this drunken rage. And I've never heard him in this kind of rage before. And he's yelling at two women who I knew at the time, know today, are victims of him. And he's yelling and he says, why didn't you cover for me? Why didn't you cover for me? And he's so angry. And so I wake up from this dream and I said to Murray, I said to my husband, when Lauren Cunningham passes away, God is going to expose Mike to the globe. And he is going to be in a drunken rage about it. And then it was a Friday, and we were actually with our friends taking communion when we get the news on October 6th that Lauren Cunningham had passed away. And one of my friends comes up to me and she says, didn't you have this dream that when he passes away, Mike was going to be exposed? And I'm like, whoa. And I said, yes. And then it was that Monday. So that was a Friday. It was that Monday that Murray went to confront Mike. And he was going to go with someone else, as Matthew 18 says to do, but Mike wouldn't allow it. So Murray went by himself.
Yeah, and a lot happens between March 5th and October 9th. We'll get to what happens when Murray goes and confronts the leaders at IHOP. But let's let's go back to you're having these dreams. You're telling your husband about the dreams and Mike. So he must have known at this point. He doesn't know at all the extent of the abuse, but he knows what your opinion of Mike is. And maybe shares that with you, that, you both don't have a very good opinion of Mike. At that point, what was his opinion of Mike based on?
We were still utterly shocked by the underbelly of this whole thing. Day by day, we would think we had been shocked enough. So at this point in March was when I think Murray started waking up to how evil this really is. In March was when Mike called the 21-day fast for Israel. And when he did that, he sends a email which in the header, it's like the biggest moment of his life, to all of his former leaders, anyone and everyone, right? And when he did, it was a Sunday night. And of course, the way he's going to manipulate and use his power is Monday morning, you're going to get on a Zoom call, right? Well, most every leader, you don't reach out on a Sunday night. They're going to be busy on that Monday morning, right? But he, in his arrogance, is like, no, you can get off whatever you're doing and get on a Zoom call, right? But it made me angry. And I said to Murray, I don't know what he's hiding, but this is the biggest smokescreen I've ever seen of him. And turns out there was actual evidence that had come forward that weekend, a video of his son's affair. And so it was about him hiding that. And, so when I said that to Murray, I could see it on Murray's face. Like, I know what you're telling me is true, but wow. So Mike is that guy. Like, whoa. Okay. I'm listening. And, I'd already had the courtroom dream about Mike being exposed. And so then he also had his app come out in March, and I was disgusted by it. And that was when I actually remembered, because in the app, he has all of these pictures of his face. Well, I mean, the guy, he's 68 at the time, I think. And I'm like, what? Like, is this about Jesus or you? Like, who does that? And then I remembered that, as a 19-year-old, he took me to his trunk in his car and he took out all of these magazines. And it was all of him, Christian magazines with his face on the front cover. And he just gives them to me as a gift. And when I had started,
wow.
And for years in my waking up process, I started to put my husband in that place. And I'm thinking, would my husband at age 42 take a 19-year-old to his car and give them magazines with his face on the front cover? Sick. Like he would never allow a magazine with his front cover, first of all. And so anyway, so Mike, I would say March for me, but also for my husband, was Mike's a bad guy. Mike's a bad guy.
This concludes part 1 of my interview with Deborah Perkins, and there's still so much more to tell. In part 2, you'll hear the moving story of how friends and former IHOP leaders banded together to support Deborah and expose evil.
Like, when anyone talks about my courage, I want to say it was an army of us, guys. It was an army, and we all went to war. We've gone to war every day. It's kingdom clashing against kingdom. This isn't about exposing just sexual sin. This is a system of evil and a system of darkness. And men and women showed up, showed up day after day, and were so full of that courage to stand for righteousness.
Again, that's coming out in part 2 of my interview with Deborah Perkins, and it is powerful, so you'll want to be watching for that. In the meantime, I hope to see many of you in Phoenix for the Restore Conference. Deborah will be there along with Tammy Woods and Elizabeth Herder and an amazing group of other speakers. And if you don't have a ticket, you still can come and buy one at the door. For more information, just go to restore2025.com. And thanks so much for listening to The Roys Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Roys. And just a reminder that The Roys Report is listener supported. So if you've appreciated these podcasts and want them to continue, please consider helping us out with a donation. To give, just go to julieroys.com/donate. That's julieroys.com/donate. Also, please subscribe to The Roys Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. That way, you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word about the podcast by leaving a review. And then, please share the podcast on social media so more people can hear about this great content. Again, thanks so much for joining me today. Hope you were blessed and encouraged.